Some presences don't enter a room, they invade it. You've seen it happen. An ordinary man, perhaps without the most imposing appearance, without expensive clothes, without magic words. And yet when he passes by, the air changes. The temperature drops a degree, and all the women, including the one you swore was uninterested, look away for a second, not to observe him, but to feel something that most men never manage to provoke. That subtle and inexplicable feeling that something is going to happen even if nothing happens. But the most disturbing thing is that he says nothing. He doesn't even try. And yet, the atmosphere around him burns at a low frequency. You probably learned the opposite, that you need to introduce yourself, explain yourself, justify yourself, that you need to be interesting, funny, intelligent. But what nobody told you, because most don't even realize it, is that there is a type of language more powerful than any well-placed phrase. A language that operates below logic, outside the realm of reason. The language of sexual tension. And it doesn't communicate with words. It communicates with presence. Here's the brutal truth. You can be the most polite man in the room, you can open all the doors, pay all the bills, compliment every detail, and still be invisible to her desire. Because desire doesn't respect logic, it respects contrast. And when you enter a room trying to please, you dissolve into it. But when you enter willing to challenge, to provoke, to be remembered, even without saying a word, you become dangerous. And danger is sexy. This video isn't about tips to appear more confident, nor about ready-made phrases to use in bars. That's amateur theater. Here, we'll talk about the essence. About the invisible mechanisms that make a woman tremble inside in the middle of a busy cafe, simply because you positioned yourself the right way. We'll deconstruct the unconscious behavior that negates your masculine energy in public. We'll reveal the triggers that activate her subconscious without a single word. And finally, we'll show you how to transform any place, from the subway to the elevator, into a bubble of sexual tension, where all that exists is you, her, and the promise of what hasn't yet been done. But hold on, this isn't an invitation to be aggressive, arrogant, or disrespectful. Quite the opposite. The greatest seducers in history weren't the loudest, but the most strategically silent. Casanova didn't shout, he whispered. Cleopatra didn't beg for attention, she inspired it. Mystery, one of the biggest names in modern seduction, didn't impress with prepared speeches. He created presence. They all understood a fundamental truth. Sexual tension is built from what you don't immediately give away. Now think about the men you've seen fail in public. Those who approach hastily, anxiously, with a desperate need to be seen as good. They talk too much, gesticulate excessively, tell irrelevant stories, compliment all the time, all trying to force a connection. And the more they try, the more the woman's gaze wanders. Because she feels it, not rationally, but viscerally. She feels he's trying to convince her. And nobody feels desire for someone who needs convincing. Sexual tension, on the other hand, happens when a woman can't completely decipher you. When she senses there's something there, but can't name it. When your gaze holds hers for half a second longer than is comfortable. When your posture doesn't apologize for existing. When you speak little, but each phrase has a specific weight, a precise intention. This kind of presence activates a primitive response in her body. This man doesn't need my validation, he's self-sufficient. And that's magnetism, because now she's no longer in control. And you know what makes it all the more cruel? Often, it's the public environment itself that leads you astray. You think, I can't seem strange, I can't seem offensive, I can't draw too much attention. And driven by this social fear, you fit in, you adapt, you hide. But the true master of tension knows how to use the environment to their advantage. They don't need to be explicit, they are implicit. They know that in public, a well-placed look says more than an entire speech. They understand that a light touch on the back as she passes by isn't just polite, it's strategic. It's a silent code, a subtle invitation for her to pay attention. And she does. That's the beauty of tension. It's almost imperceptible, until it becomes inevitable. When well constructed, it transforms even the most banal gesture into something laden with meaning. A handshake, a restrained smile, a seemingly innocent comment. Everything becomes a symbol, a game, a suggestion. But for that, you need to abandon the fear of not being accepted. You need to relinquish the need for validation. You're not there to be understood. You're there to be felt, to be enigmatic, to be the unanswered question. Because while others try to be lovable, you will be unforgettable. And here's the great irony. The same men who strive so hard to appear correct are the ones who cause the most discomfort. Because there's something disconcerting about someone who is clearly trying too hard. It sounds fake. It sounds insecure. It sounds desperate. But the man who is comfortable with his own silence, with his own space, with his own rhythm, that's the one who creates real discomfort, but the kind of discomfort that seduces, the kind of discomfort that intrigues, the kind of discomfort that makes her wonder, what does this man know that others don't? And she'll want to find out, but she'll only want to if you don't give everything away on a silver platter, if you stop trying to be deciphered, if you understand that sexual tension in public doesn't stem from what you do, but from what you provoke without doing anything, from what you allow her to imagine. It's about what you sustain with your body, with your gaze, with your energy. That's why most men are forgettable. They over-explain themselves. They try to justify their presence. They ask permission to exist. But true masters don't ask. They simply enter, and the environment responds. When you understand this, when you internalize that the mistake isn't in not doing enough, but in doing too much, a new world opens, because now you stop seeking attention and start controlling the atmosphere. And whoever controls the atmosphere controls desire. She doesn't need to see your naked body to feel aroused. She doesn't even need to touch you. In fact, she could be 2 meters away, talking to someone else, and still feel your presence seeping into her skin, like an invisible warmth that rises up her legs, up her stomach, touches her neck, and settles right behind the nape of her neck, where intuition resides. That's where it all begins. Because female desire, contrary to what many think, isn't born from what is said. It's born from what is suggested. It's born in silence. A woman's body is a biological radar, finely tuned to detect intentions. And true sexual tension, the kind that makes her lose the thread of the conversation, the kind that makes her forget she's in public, comes from a type of language that isn't taught in school. The language of instincts. Male presence, when well calibrated, is felt like a gravitational force. It pulls, it envelops, it presses, and it does this without a single touch, yet. But let's be more precise. Have you ever entered a room and felt someone was watching you, even without looking directly at you? Have you ever suddenly turned your face and made eye contact with someone who was silently staring at you? This small phenomenon is the most primitive manifestation of the instinct of perception, and it works in both sexes. But in the case of women, it's even more acute. And when you learn to use it consciously, you cease to be just another person and become a sensory experience. Here's the first trigger, the gaze. But not just any gaze, not the one that seeks approval, nor the one that seeks something in return. I'm talking about a gaze that sustains, a gaze that observes calmly but firmly, that doesn't hide desire but also doesn't reveal it entirely. A gaze that holds hers for half a second beyond what's comfortable. That extra micro time, that almost imperceptible detail, is enough for her body to react. The brain interprets it as a sign of silent dominance, and the body responds with microdilations in the pupils, an accelerated heart rate, and a slight shiver of anticipation. And you didn't even say hi. According to studies from the University of Aberdeen in Scotland, women tend to find men who maintain direct eye contact for longer periods more attractive. But science is just the surface. What matters is what it evokes in her inner world. A firm gaze in public, when well executed, is a form of non-physical touch. It invades without permission. And that's exciting because it's too subtle to be blocked, but too intense to be ignored. The second trigger, the invisible touch. Direct touches are too obvious. The invisible touch happens without contact. It arises when you enter her space in a calculated, natural, but slightly daring way. Approach from behind when greeting, lean slightly in when whispering something in her ear, even if it's not intimate. The secret lies in the deeper, lower tone of voice, closer to what the environment demands. This contrast between the outside world and your directed communication creates a momentary bubble, a space just between the two of you. That's tension. You're in a restaurant, and instead of speaking loudly and smiling excessively like everyone else, you lower your tone. You speak as if sharing a secret. You lean your body as if protecting a message. And while the environment remains noisy, she feels that you are creating a parallel reality where only she matters. That's social hypnosis. The third trigger, the implicit posture of command. Posture isn't about puffing out your chest like a peacock. That's caricatured. Posture is about not apologizing for taking up space. It's about knowing where to position your body to be noticed without seeming like you're trying. It's about staying silent when others talk too much. It's about not automatically laughing at jokes that aren't funny. It's about being still and relaxed while everyone around you is agitated and restless. And here's a critical point. Tension arises from contrast. If everyone is talking loudly, you speak softly. If everyone is trying to impress, you observe. If everyone moves anxiously, you remain firm. It is in this contrast that tension grows. Because now, in her eyes, you don't belong in that environment. You are there, but above. Different. Intriguing. This is the forbidden element. It's the nonverbal signal that you are a man who navigates social codes but doesn't submit to them. You may be among everyone, but you are not like anyone else, and her body notices and begins to react. There's a quote by Robert Greene that sums it up perfectly. Desire grows in the space between promise and delivery. What Greene is saying is that mystery is more powerful than consumption. A woman feels more tension in what might happen than in what has already happened. So, the master of tension knows how to keep that promise alive. He creates expectations with gestures, glances, silences, but he never rushes the delivery. Because he understands that the climax needs to be delayed. It needs to mature. It needs to ferment in her body until she herself desires the explosion. This leads us to the dance of suggestion. When you say something with a double meaning, when you compliment a part of her body, but look away before she has time to process it, when you tease and then change the subject. Each of these micro-actions leaves a trail of unresolved tension. And her body accumulates the stimulus as if it were an elastic band being slowly stretched. She may continue talking normally, but something inside her is boiling. And what's most brilliant about this strategy is that it works even when you're in a group. Even when she's accompanied, because it doesn't depend on your words or your direct actions. It depends on how you exist in that space. It depends on how you direct your attention, how you manage your energy. She feels it. She always feels it. Let's bring this to reality. Imagine you're at an event. Many men are there, trying to seem interesting, telling funny stories, exaggerating their accomplishments, and in the midst of all this, you're there, relaxed, with a drink in your hand, listening more than speaking. Every now and then, your eyes meet hers. You don't look away, you hold them. And then, you look away with a slight smile. You don't approach immediately, you don't rush. You allow the atmosphere to build the tension for you. And when you finally approach, not to compliment, but to comment on something sideways, something subtle, something that goes unnoticed by others, she's already in a receptive state. She's already ready to be led, and she doesn't even understand why. Her rational mind might resist. It might say, "He didn't even talk to me properly." But her body has already decided, and the body doesn't lie. This is the most refined weapon of seduction. To make her desire what doesn't yet exist, to make her miss something she's never had, to create an emotional void, a void filled with anticipation. That's what makes great seducers irresistible. They don't deliver pleasure, they create thirst. And here's a fascinating paradox. The more you try to provoke physically, the less tension you generate. But the more you hold back, the more intense the energy becomes. Because the human body doesn't deal well with ambiguity. It wants resolution. And when you don't allow that immediate resolution, it plunges into a state of alert, of desire, of searching. That's why so many women fall for men they barely know. Because these men know how to create emotional tension with almost invisible elements. And that's also why so many long relationships lose their spark. Because the tension disappears and everything becomes comfort. But comfort doesn't excite, stability doesn't provoke, repetition doesn't fascinate. So if you want to create sexual tension in public, you don't need words nor explicit touches. You need intention, presence, control of your rhythm. You need to understand that less is more, and that the right silence at the right moment can be more exciting than 1,000 compliments. All of this, of course, requires practice. It requires self-awareness. It requires reading the environment. It requires you to train your own body to communicate even before you speak. But once mastered, this power changes everything. Because now, you stop competing with other men and start operating on a different frequency. A frequency where you don't need to chase after it because the tension makes it come to you. It's not the place, it's the atmosphere. And the atmosphere isn't in the environment, it's in you. The most common mistake men make is waiting for the setting to be favorable to create a connection. Waiting for the bar to be quieter, for her to be alone, for her friends to leave, for the timing to be perfect. But true masters of tension know a secret that transforms any situation, however banal or chaotic it may seem, into an almost cinematic experience. They don't react to the environment. They shape the environment with their presence, with their energy, with their silence, and thus they create what we call a bubble, a symbolic and emotional space where everything around ceases to matter, where only us exists. This is the hidden game. The ability to manipulate the perception of time and space without touching, without talking too much, without asking permission. It's like a parallel narrative unfolding behind the scenes of social interaction. While everyone is distracted by superficialities, you and she live a story that only the two of you can feel. And the beauty of it is that this bubble can be created anywhere. Inside an elevator, in a crowded cafe, at a corporate event, or even on a moving subway. Because the secret isn't outside. It's in how you make it feel observed, different, highlighted amidst the chaos. As if for a moment the whole world had disappeared and only you remained. Let's dissect this dynamic. The bubble begins with your selective attention. You don't look at it like everyone else does. Your gaze isn't one of hunting nor of adoration. It's one of silent scanning. It's a gaze that recognizes something and then looks away. As if it had seen something rare, but preferred to keep the mystery. This plants the first seed. It feels noticed in a different way, and curiosity is born there. But you don't harvest this curiosity, you let it grow. Then comes the contrasting movement. While others are agitated, you slow down. While everyone speaks loudly, you breathe. While everyone tries to impress, you simply observe. This creates a magnetic field around you. Because contrast, once again, is the language of fascination. And she begins to realize that you're in the same place, but on another plane. And then the first real contact happens. It could be a phrase said at an unexpected moment. It could be a comment about something only she noticed. It could be an implicit compliment, where you don't directly say she's attractive, but make it clear that you noticed something beyond the surface. The tone of your voice is fundamental here. It needs to be too intimate for the context, too deep for the ambient volume. Too paused for the speed of the conversation. This is not accidental, this is orchestration. The French philosopher Simone Weil said, "Attention, absolutely pure and unmixed, is prayer." And this applies to seduction. When you offer true attention, not to obtain something, but to perceive deeply, you elevate the interaction to an almost spiritual level. And it is in this space that the bubble forms. When she feels she is being seen in a naked way, not in the body, but in the soul, she begins to respond. She starts to go inside. But the bubble only survives if there's rhythm. And here's the key. Tension isn't a straight line. Tension is a pulse. It's expansion and contraction. It's approach and retreat. It's looking and then ignoring. It's smiling and then falling silent. It's provoking and then changing the subject. When you master this rhythm, you make her brain oscillate between comfort and challenge, between curiosity and frustration, between expectation and surprise. And the more her brain oscillates, the more her body responds. This game seems invisible to outsiders, but for her, it's an emotional hurricane. And the more you sustain this game without falling into the anxiety of moving to the next step, the more powerful the tension becomes. Because desire, as Lacan said, is always the desire for something that is lacking. And if you give it away too quickly, you kill the very object of desire. Now let's add an extra layer. The setting as an ally. A true seducer uses the environment as part of the script. If you're in a cafe, for example, and the waiter approaches, You can interrupt your conversation with her for a second, place an order while looking the waiter in the eye, but keeping your body slightly turned towards her. This communicates that, even distracted, you still include her. If you're walking and she says something interesting, you can stop walking for a second, just to look at her silently. A validating silence, and then continue walking, as if nothing had happened. This type of micro-gesture is infinitely more powerful than any verbal compliment. Style, in the book The Game, recounts how Mystery transformed mundane spaces into stages of emotional impact with a simple shift in energy. He could make a woman forget she was surrounded by friends, simply through his gaze and posture, because he knew what few know. When you communicate with your body that you are in a parallel universe and that she has been invited into that universe, she enters. Not through words, but through resonance. And here perhaps comes the most advanced point: the control of symbolic narrative. A master doesn't just create a bubble, he gives meaning to that bubble. He transforms the moment into something that will be remembered. How? With a phrase spoken at the right time. With a touch that doesn't need to be sexual, but is too personal for the context. With a gesture that shows you're seeing something no one else sees. That's silent storytelling. You make her feel that what's happening between you is unique. It's an exception. It's forbidden, and everything that's forbidden excites. But there's a risk here, a real risk, because this power can be used to manipulate, to generate emotional dependence, to lead without integrity. And that's why this kind of knowledge isn't for the curious. It's for men with self-control, because you're manipulating someone's senses. You're creating emotional reality. You're guiding biological impulses with psychological mastery. And that demands ethics. Remember when we talked about the gaze that lingers for half a second longer? Here, at the peak of tension, you can use that same principle with speech. You say something, and stop. You let her digest it. You don't rush to fill the silence. You let the silence do the work. That's power. Because now, every word you say carries weight. Every pause becomes an invitation. And every tiny gesture can be the trigger for an internal earthquake. And here comes one of the most brutal and most beautiful strategies. The final shift in focus. When the tension is at its peak, when she's completely enveloped in the bubble, you change focus, you re-engage with the group, you change the subject, you distance yourself physically, but without losing the energetic connection. And at that moment, she feels the emptiness, she feels the broken connection, and she begins to want to rebuild it. Now she is emotionally invested. Now she desires. Now you understand why so many men fail silently, even when they think they're doing everything right. The problem was never a lack of good intentions. It was the absence of strategy. You've seen how excessive comfort kills desire, how predictability destroys mystery, and how tension arises not from what you say, but from what you communicate without saying anything. You've learned that attraction isn't logical. It's instinctive, visceral, almost animalistic. And that to provoke this instinct, you need to master the art of presence. You need to create tension with your gaze, with silence, with how you occupy a space. You've also seen that there's a forbidden element that few dare to explore. The game of contrast, of suggestion, of planned silence. The ability to activate her body without even touching her. And finally, you've understood that true seduction happens when you create a bubble, an emotional universe where only the two of you exist, even surrounded by other people. But all that we've revealed here is only the surface. The truth is, mastering this power requires more than theory. You need to listen, feel, internalize. You need practical commands, mental training, access to techniques that reprogram your body language, your mindset, and your masculine energy. That's why we created the Forbidden Manual, How to Trigger Desire in 60 Seconds, a complete audiobook that will transform everything you've just learned into real skill. This isn't just any book. It's a code, a direct map to unlock your magnetic presence. These are techniques for instantly activating desire, based on behavioral psychology, field tests, high-level seduction strategies, and most importantly, applicable in less than 60 seconds in any environment, public or private. So here's what you need to understand. You've already seen what happens to those who live in nice guy mode, subdued, comfortable. The price of ignorance is invisibility. The price of hesitation is oblivion. But now you have access to a forbidden tool. A direct, no-nonsense method to install real sexual tension and make her feel it, even before she meets you.